Good. Wow.
How'd you get here?
Why is there no alt-left pipeline? From Ryan White.
Okay. Well, I haven't been making overtly political videos
All right, better. I can actually reduce the playback speed.
for very long, and to be fair, I haven't really been alive for very long.
I'm going to really quick
I'm
just
banned.
do what I've got to do, which is, who is this person? Just a guy making videos, politics, social trends, exploring what it's like to live in this totally fun yet not screwed up world. Haha. Ryan, I'm a writer. I make YouTube videos in my free time, videos about social trends, political science, and complex issues.
At the ripe old age of 23, I, like many of you, have been steeping in the world of online political discourse for what has felt like my entire life. I also made the grave mistake of pursuing a degree in a political social science, so luckily for me, my entire education has also revolved around various attempts to understand how politics operates in the age of the internet. And one of the most common political themes I've seen referred to in the past decade on social media is that of the alt-right pipeline. The idea is that there's a mechanism that exists on the internet which, primarily through recommendation algorithms on video sharing sites like YouTube or TikTok, captures the attention of your average Joe and slowly pushes their views further and further toward the right. Now, in academia, the alt-right pipeline term refers specifically to this algorithmic mechanism. However, I think most of us use it in a more broad way to sort of refer to the process.
That's fairly inaccurate, actually. The alt-right pipeline is not just specifically the algorithmic process. It's a larger thing. It's a larger thing.
Of radicalization that can occur not just on video sharing sites, but on other social media, forums and chan boards, and in certain offline local communities as well. And while there is a lot of media out there talking about the concept of the alt-right pipeline and how it works, I want to pose a different question today. Why is there no alt-left pipeline? We're going to walk through a quick framework to answer that question as simply as we can, but before we do that, a quick
because leftism doesn't have a singular goal or ability to be sort of in line with capital in the same way, and since we live in a space that is entirely dictated by capital, everything that capital wants, which is necessarily reactionary, and therefore alt-right is ultimately where things go. And that's great. We finished. It's good.
Disclaimer. This is not going to be incredibly in-depth in terms of analysis, but I do plan on expanding on some of these topics in later videos. The main goal is to answer the question without overly complicating things.
No, it's simple. It's simple. Money. Money. Every part of the alt-right pipeline, whatever you want to call it, had huge amounts of dollars put behind it from oil barons and capitalists and investment groups. That's the end of the answer. That's it. They have more money so they could fake it until they make it. Ben Shapiro, as an example, was propped up by the Koch brothers, as were a lot of his shithead friends. And despite getting no views early on, having views bought, the Daily Wire for years, Ben Shapiro for years, literally advertised whole episodes of their shows. I don't mean that they advertised for the episodes. I mean, the adverts were full episodes of their shows. If you didn't know, this is insane. It's a real thing they did. So, their money. If anyone knows, we joke that George Soros is on our side. He's not. If anyone knows of billionaires who like to throw money at leftist projects, let me know. I'll sell out.
Let's get on with that. There's a pretty logical through line that we can track in order to figure out why the alt-right pipeline works, and by negation, why there couldn't be a true alt-left pipeline of a similar nature. First, we need to sort out what the goal of a radicalization pipeline
I am going to say money. I'm going to start saying capital to everything he asks, I think.
is. In my understanding, its goal is to capture the attention of one who is relatively disinterested in politics, the majority of people, and not only make them interested in politics, but eventually interested in radical politics and political activism in favor of the community that radicalized them.
In favor of the community that radicalized them. The challenge with neoliberalism as a thing is that you believe that like they were radicalized and they chose a side rather than the process of things that purchased them and put them in the position, made them how they are. The idea that anyone could do this is fucking crazy.
Since I'm American, I'm going to use our political parties in history for the rest of this video, but I think the ideas are relatively sound when used in other contexts. The most important component in the modern alt-right pipeline, in my opinion, is the media ecosystem that the Republican Party has been building since the 1990s.
Capital.
I could go on for hours about this one, but I will spare you that for now. All we need to know is that back in the early 1900s, there was a large public distrust in Republican economic policy after the Great Depression. This caused the Republican Party to more closely align itself with the Democrats, not just in economic policy, but later in other social policy efforts as well. The alignment between the two parties is what eventually allowed for the New Deal era to occur, since both parties agreed on a general direction for the country.
If you have a view of the New Deal in which FDR was able to just work with the Republicans and that everyone was kind of in line with it, you have no understanding of history. I mean, that's the end of the sentence. FDR was brilliant politically, but he was not popular with Republicans. There was a thing called the businessman plot. George Bush's grandfather, George H.W. Bush's father, worked with a lot of other guys to try to kill him and coup the country. That's how little they were in agreement with him. FDR cleverly politicked and worked and figured out how to get exactly the number of votes he got. Republicans were not helping, nor did they help. And also, by the way, the Democrat Party didn't help a great deal. They worked against him as well, especially when it came to his successor and replacement. Yeah, Prescott Bush, piece of shit human. Yeah, the Smedley Butler plot. It's actually a really amazing story, but again, it is not that the Republicans kind of got in line with FDR.
Only disagreeing on how to implement certain policies for the most part. And as we well know, in regards to most social movements, each surge in a certain ideology is met with an opposing reaction. And this is effectively what allowed Ronald Reagan to take the presidency.
No. Okay, so here is, this is really, if you don't know about things, you don't have to say stuff. Did you know that? If you don't know things, you don't have to talk about it. That's like, I'm gonna get a t-shirt made that says, if you don't know things, you don't got talk about it.
Is met with an opposing reaction in regards to most, only disagreeing on how to implement certain policies for the most part. And as we well know, in regards to most social movements, each surge in a certain ideology is met with an opposing reaction. And this is effectively what allowed Ronald Reagan to take the presidency in
That is 40 years of American history post-war to Ronald Reagan. And you go, look, it's a reaction to FDR. Reagan was not a reaction to FDR. Reagan was not a reaction, actually. He was planned and set up and placed and very much part of a very, very particular wealthy group of hyper-conservatives who wanted to sort of undo a lot of the work that had been done for rights. For Nixon got in line when he made the EPA, for fuck's sake. Nixon was trying to move us slowly towards having single-payer health care ended up working with HMOs. The businesses that ran the Republican Party were not a reaction to FDR. That's so ahistorical, it hurts my brain. That's just... Jimmy Carter was not a great president. Sorry, I know he just died. I didn't like him when he was alive either. He's a kind man, but he should never have been president. He was the one who began the damage of undoing how unions are treated in America. Blame Jimmy. Don't blame Ronnie. Ronnie was never pro-union. Ronnie was anti-union. Ronnie was a piece of shit his whole life. And his wife was famous for literally sucking dick throughout Hollywood. Like, these are the conservative Christians. Like, they are like Trump is. Whoever they need, whatever they need to put someone in front who's a doddering piece of shit who's able to get what power wants. They were better at it when they didn't have social media and they didn't have to do things every day because Ronald Reagan was a useless old bag of shit. But they did a lot of really illegal things throughout his presidency to maintain power. Iran-Contra alone is insane. But leading up to it, the idea that it was a reaction to FDR and not the slow destruction of the country as the middle class gained the most wealth it ever had, and the wealthy began to fight back against it by siding with the Republicans and then funding in a lot of different ways to do that, is ahistorical. Is the Screen Actors Guild not a union? Read about Ronnie and the Screen Actors Guild. He's happy to be part of a union when it's his union. Then he's happy to work against it when it's not. He's happy to turn people in when they're Reds or homosexuals. He's happy to be a gigantic piece of human shit.
1980. What is important to understand.
SAG is a union. Read about Ronnie and his history with the union, because he led it for a while, and union leaders aren't always good for unions.
At this point is that the strategy of the Republican Party began to shift. They noticed that their conservative policy proposals were relatively unpopular amongst the general public, especially in states required to win elections. If they could instead create a system where politics was more about culture than actual policies, they could attempt to convince Americans that they were the right choice to pick because they were the more patriotic or constitutional or...
I mean, it's... have you heard of the Southern Strategy, Ryan? Southern Strategy. There's a quote. It's on the Wikipedia, I have no doubt. One fucking line. One sec. There's one quote. You don't say busing. Come on, do they not do this? The editors go back and forth on this. It's one of my favorite things. Here we go. I probably can't have that on screen. Well, we're going to just switch real quick because that was not, I did not mean to put that up. That is just where we are for the time being. Good Lord, Brooks. Got to be careful when you know you're looking up what racists said. One moment. We're going to switch over to a screen. There we go. Okay. Lee Atwater, who's kind of a horrible piece of shit. In Reagan, because Reagan, by the way, Reagan ran in 76. Reagan didn't win. To say Reagan is a reaction to FDR would kind of presuppose that he would have won then. But again, doesn't matter. I'm just going to read some Lee Atwater. As to the whole Southern strategy Harry Dent and others put together in 1968, opposition to the Voting Rights Act would have been a central part of keeping the South. Now, Reagan doesn't have to do that. All you have to do to keep the South is for Reagan to run in place on the issues he's campaigned on since 1964. That's fiscal conservatism, balancing the budget, cut taxes, the whole cluster. But the fact is, isn't it that Ronald Reagan does get the Wallace voter and to the racist side of the Wallace voter by doing away with legal services, by cutting down on food stamps? This is the quote. So just, you tell me if Ryan's got the right vote on this, because Lee Atwater, y'all don't quote me on this. That's how you know it's a great line. I love Lee Atwater. He's such a dumb fuck. And y'all don't quote me on this. You start out in 1954 by saying, he says it. By 1968, you can't. That hurts you. It backfires. So instead, you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, all that. You're getting so abstract now. You're talking about cutting taxes, and all these things you're talking about are totally economic things. A byproduct of them is that blacks get hurt worse than whites. subconsciously that's part of it. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that if it is getting that abstract, that coded, that we're doing away with the racial problem one way or another, you follow me? Because obviously sitting around saying we want to cut this is much more abstract than even the busing thing, and of a hell of a lot more abstract than it's on the Wikipedia page. And also, y'all don't quote me on this, is like my favorite way for quotes that are horrifying to start, and it's all too common. The Southern strategy was quite simple. Hey, there's a lot of racists. We can't court the racists because if we court the racists, we won't be able to get anyone who's not a racist. And as much as America overall kind of has its racism thing, the South, kind of fucking super racist. The North, less outwardly racist. At least it used to be. Still, I think is the case. But they were like, we were mystified because we can't just walk around saying, kill all the blacks. But what if instead of that we said, busing is being forced? Reintegration's forced. What about cutting taxes? These are things that they literally said are about hurting black people more and about dealing with the racial problem and getting the racist white voter to vote for them. God damn.
Create a system where politics was more about culture than actual policies that could attempt to convince Americans that they were the right choice to pick because they were the more patriotic or constitutional or
that ain't why Reagan won. That ain't why Reagan won. What the fuck? Have y'all seen God, now I'm saying y'all because I watched some Atwater. It didn't even stop there. Did anyone see the Willie Horton ad that Bush ran when he went up against Dukakis? This is the Willie Horton 1988 attack. This was a big deal. And this was a big deal. This helped define and set up the win for Bush. Not even a question. And you tell me if you think that this is racial.
Bush and Dukakis on crime. Bush supports the death penalty for first-degree murderers. Dukakis not only opposes the death penalty, he allowed first-degree murderers to have weekend passes from prison. One was Willie Horton, who murdered a boy in a robbery, stabbing him 19 times. Despite a life sentence, Horton received 10 weekend passes from prison. Horton fled, kidnapped a young couple, stabbing the man and repeatedly raping his girlfriend. Weekend prison passes. Dukakis on crime.
Yes, it's just about patriotism. Yeah. And it's the way it's stanchioned and set up is so fucking crazy. Weekend passes. So this is where you start talking about like how the world works and how things happen and how you can reset up and rebuild a narrative. In the 70s, there was a thing called furloughs. So prison furloughs were like super common. What they did is they encouraged people who behaved well, who did well inside a prison to go outside of the prison. I know everyone who exists today kind of thinks that prison is always having been the same thing, but it really wasn't. It really wasn't. They would go out to lunch, like they'd be given a few bucks. They'd go shop. They'd go to church on Sundays. Willie Horton specifically would spend time with his daughter. He fully denies he had anything to do with murder. It's almost irrelevant, but it was incredibly common at the time federally for prisoners to get furloughs. Dukakis was a governor. That's it. He didn't like make this thing happen. He didn't introduce prison. He didn't fight them. Like, anyway, Horton on one of his furloughs skipped away and was found at the scene. That's great. But the whole thing pretends like Dukakis did this. Like it shows on screen right now, weekend prison passes. But it's like, well, wait, Ronnie did that too. Federal prisoners had this. So George W. Bush was doing this. That didn't matter. And that's how you set up. And that's what you do. It's one of the more extraordinary things. And just to mention, in case you are curious, it isn't just Republicans. Al Gore, who was at the time trying to become president, he's like the poor man's Joe Biden, I guess. like Joe Biden of another era. He did it. He's the one who did this. He started this. He did the lie. He lied. He did the first lie. Al Gore is the one who did this in a primary debate, brought up Willie Horton and gave that to the Republicans, which ended up costing Dukakis 100%. This cost Dukakis the election. And Lee Atwater, the guy I quoted earlier who said all those N-words, the phrase he said was, "By the time I'm done, they're going to think Willie Horton is Dukakis' vice president." There you go. And again, his name's not Willie. His name is not Willie. It's William Horton. In fact, he didn't really go by Willie. But he's a black man. Can't call him William and really piss people off and arouse that racial side unless you can make it a grainy photo. And a grainy old photo, not even the one from the thing. Like they found a photo. They started calling him Willie. They started pushing out. And that's it. That's the setup. Thank you, Al Gore. Cocksucker. So no. Sorry, you're wrong.
Working class party, despite there being a clear dissonance between those phrases and their actual policy proposals. And this is where the media ecosystem comes in. In the 1990s, the Republican Party and its donors began to invest a significant amount of funds and resources into building a widespread media apparatus with the goal of uniting the many small conservative coalitions throughout the country under a single narrative. The idea was to convince anyone from business owners to evangelicals to even your average dissatisfied American that the established...
Okay. It's just, I mean, I feel bad because it's clear that this guy has no concept of like how these things work and didn't want to research it. But again, if you don't know things, you don't have to talk about them. In the 90s, conservatives started doing a bunch of shit, right? With talk radio started funding that. Leaves out kind of a couple of major things that happened, right? We used to have a series of laws in our country, and the laws really had to do with like balance and fairness in media. There was a lot of rules around sort of, I want to say everything. Like in 1987, before the 90s, the FCC got rid of what was called the Fairness Doctrine. The Fairness Doctrine itself had to do with ensuring that if you had a radio station, it couldn't be just a view. You couldn't have a conservative talk radio station. That was illegal. It had to be news, and if you had a liberal, you had to have a righty. You had a righty, you had to have a lefty. That thing happened. Reagan, who had already been working with people to figure out how to build all of these things and turn sort of everything towards the right wing, one of the big pushes was to get rid of the Fairness Doctrine. So Reagan put in an FCC commissioner who got rid of the Fairness Doctrine. And that was the mark. At that point, Rush Limbaugh and his market that were absolutely funded by billionaires started buying lots of radio stations. What we see today is a direct result of that and the Telecommunications Act of 1996, which Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich made sure got through. Once upon a time, you couldn't own multiple radio stations. Okay. You had to be local, basically. You can't, but that's not the case anymore. They got rid of that. They got rid of Fairness Doctrine, and now you could have conservatives like Sinclair Media Group, if you don't know them, buy up a fuck ton of TV and radio stations and turn them all conservative. Enforce that, which is what is true. Why is there an alt-right pipeline? Sinclair Media Group. There's no left version of this. Sinclair Media Group Sinclair Broadcast Group, apologies. Just to read it off. It's insane. It's one of the largest fucking things ever. Owning and operating 193 stations across the country in over 100 markets, covers 40% of American households. Sinclair is the largest owner of stations that are affiliated with Fox, NBC, CBS, ABC, My Network, and CW. Sinclair owns 4 digital multi-class networks, Comet, Charge the Nest, and TBD, and the sports-oriented cable network, the Tennis Channel. This is Sinclair. Who owns Sinclair? It could be a guy named Julian Smith, who's a psychotic right-winger who literally writes opinion pieces and sends them to local stations and forces them to read it. Yes, this is what led to Citizens United. All of this is like, to say that they just started like doing this in 1990, again, misunderstands how all of this works and how all of this happened. And it didn't just happen.
Establishment Democrats were coming to destroy the very fabric of the United States, and that the small town Republicans were going to stop them, so long as you donate to them and vote for them. This media narrative also consisted of broad moral panics, reimaginings of American history, and an oddly postmodern skepticism and pessimism not only about the Democrats, but also any Republicans that might sympathize with their causes. And this narrative caught on like wildfire, whether it be on AM radio with Rush Limbaugh or cable news with Sean Hannity and the Fox News crew, and it served as the foundation for the Republican strategy on how to win elections. If you can't make people vote for your party, make them vote against the other. Let's move on to the second point. These conservative narratives, like blaming economic instability solely on immigration, or claiming that the LGBT community is corrupting children, bigotry in general toward any non-straight cisgender white male group, they generate fear. And let me be clear, both parties attempt to play into these narratives to try and win elections. However, it is important to note that there are multiple studies, which I've linked in the description, that show that individuals with conservative policy leanings are also more likely to focus on negative narratives and to have increased sensitivity to perceived threats. In that context,
all the studies are having issues because they're correlative, not causative. There's a whole bunch of shit that goes with that. And also, there's just, these studies have problems.
It makes sense why both parties try to use these narratives to win elections. Republicans need to activate every conservative that they can, and Democrats want to win on the margins by flipping center-right Republican voters. Both parties engage.
Jesus, goddamn. Is this what people think? No wonder
Engaging with negative,
we are.
fearful narratives is also great for the alt-right pipeline.
Is there a good history covering the stuff I'm talking about? Let me think for a second. Tom Hartman, who I've got issues with some of his writings, so it's not everything, but The Hidden History of Neoliberalism and The Hidden History of American Oligarchy are both, I think, very nice, documented, interesting sort of tales of this. Tom Hartman has been a radio guy for a very long time, and it's one of his very specific like things that he's attacked. John Oliver did a piece on Sinclair and also another one on like AM radio. Like this stuff, there's a bunch of this stuff out there. Yeah, this feels like a liberal was made in a lab.
Because fear makes people want to protect themselves and the things they love. And alt-right ideals are broadly centered around hatred toward outgroups, ultra-conservative social policies, and isolationism and nationalism, all of which can be fostered by the repetition and installation of fear. Leftist ideals, however, broadly advocate for community-focused solutions that are inclusive and perhaps most importantly, new or progressive. That's why the left can't necessarily utilize fear. While the right's goal is to protect itself against perceived threats, the left's goal is to overcome obstacles of fear, to incorporate and advocate alongside groups that are marginalized and exploited by neoconservative capitalism. Instilling fear would mean
That's a very fair way to put it. That's very lovely.
To shift the blame onto someone else. Leftist movements seek to take responsibility and first create change from the inside. Fear, in the way that conservatives utilize it, is incompatible with these goals, and in the modern media landscape means that leftist ideals are less likely to spread in the public consciousness than conservative ideals. Now the third point. Young people have a lot of problems going on all the time. That's kind of what being young is about. However, for the sake of this video, we have to look at what kinds of problems would cause someone to become susceptible to the siren's call of a radicalization pipeline. In Innuendo Studios' alt-right playbook, the accumulation of problems that lead someone into a pipeline is called soul sickness. This sickness can be brought on by many things, but perhaps most importantly are trauma and isolation, especially amongst men. And to be clear, this isn't me doing a feel bad for all white men because they're racist bit, but just hear me out. Folks that have had traumatic or life-changing events occur to them are most likely to become susceptible to these right-wing narratives, as they not only provide an outlet for anger and a community to fill in those support roles that might have otherwise been lost through their trauma, but also a series of common enemies to direct that anger toward as a community. This is why, anecdotally, divorced dads and young lonely men are the most likely to fall into these pipelines, since modern conservative social standards isolate and generally prevent men from expressing camaraderie or brotherly love for each other. Those pesky leftist community-oriented vibes are not at all what these folks are looking for. Often, they feel victimized by the state or by their ex-wives or their classmates or whoever else, and they just want a place to direct that anger. Rarely do they ever want a solution to it. Their problems are just a given to them.
And it seems fine. It's not really useful. Lilia's writing. There's other books. Nicole Himmer's Messengers of the Right is one that comes to mind, which is literally like a materialist history of right-wing media from 1940s on, because that's really when I would say that's probably like the totality of it that makes it interesting. That would be probably top of my list. I'll see if I can find a couple others, but that one is like a history book of what I'm talking about. I don't have a PDF of it. I think it's been like almost a decade since I read it. I had a physical book of it at some point. I'll see if I can find it.
On to the fourth point. Any given person that feels vaguely victimized then is a lot more likely to pay attention to the more surface level commentators on the right, because they broadly speak to that person's worsening material conditions without getting too in the weeds about actual politics. In the 90s, this character was played by Limbaugh, Hannity, Buchanan, and Fox News in general, and nowadays it's Elon Musk, Jordan Peterson, Dave Rubin, and Ben Shapiro, just to name a few. The left simply does not...
Wait.
This character was played by Limbaugh, Hannity, Buchanan, and Fox News in general, and nowadays it's Elon Musk, Jordan Peterson, Dave Rubin, and Ben Shapiro, just to name a few. The left simply does not have the same game. The Democratic Party funds liberal news outlets and commentators, not leftist.
The Democratic Party doesn't fund anybody. If you don't know, like, the difference in this, and it's a really weird phrasing, he says that the Democratic Party is not going to fund the left because they're busy funding liberal news outlets and commentators. No, they're not. They don't do that. Someone can correct me, but they don't do that. The liberal news outlets are funded by, weapons manufacturers and capitalist systems. Like NBC, like Disney, like these others. They're who does he think, like the Dems are like propping up what? TYT? Like Majority Report? How are they doing that? Like what the fuck is he talking about?
Commentators. So the only place folks are able to be introduced to leftist commentary is on RedTube. I love PhilosophyTube and ContraPoints, of course, but they're just unable to meet the vast majority of people where they are, especially if those people are dissatisfied with what they perceive as culture war persecution against them. The Republican Party has bet it.
Boy, yeah. Why would anyone who's finding the stories of persecution against them, why wouldn't they? Why the last place you'd want to look is at PhilosophyTube. At a channel that exists as self-persecution nightmares and the neurotic love of demanding people accept me. Jesus Christ.
Its entire future on meeting these people, straight men and their wives, where they are, and not just slowly pushing them positively toward the right, but negatively away from anything perceived as leftist.
Straight white women too, by the way. I hate to break it to you, we know the demographics. You could have looked up the demographics. This isn't just like white dudes. It's a complex interweaving of those things, but whiteness is at the core. And I wonder if whiteness at the core has anything to do with it as well. But let's not talk about race. Fair enough.
And the last point, this funneling of regular Joes into rival political teams has created an environment in which party seeps into our personal...
See, and if this is his final point, this is just shit across the board. So here's the thing. When you have a situation like he's talking about here, the alt-right pipeline, the interactions themselves and how they're built and how they're encouraged create a type of person. He's only able to look at it purely through a political or sociological lens that has to have that. But let's take an example. There's videos filling everything and have been for years of rage bait. A person creates a video where they're going to, oh, look, this is me. I'm going to make my crazy casserole. And they just put in like raw lasagna noodles, 2 cans of Coke. They just put an empty can in it. And then they fill the rest with nacho cheese. Then they bake it. And then they go, that's good. And all the comments are like, oh, God, it's disgusting, blah, blah. Now that thing seems innocuous on its face. Seems simple. But no, that reaction, that thing, that rage that is happening, that's because rage bait is about breaking down and angering you. And the things that get the most responses bubble up to the top of whatever fucking feed they are. Reactions are what drive engagement. Twitter, once upon a time, and this is a weird thing to say, once upon a time there wasn't an algorithm. I know, children, allow me to tell you about this time. Once upon a time, I would write 140 characters, and it would post. And on that post, it would disappear as time passed. When you logged in, if you were not looking at it at that time, and you followed me, you may miss this post. It was sad. It was a dark time where we would just see the things that were shown to us that other people posted as they did. And then Twitter went, boy, people aren't really doing a lot of page views. Because, see, if we're going to have ads, what we really care about is page views. If a person sits on their feed, which is what people did, and it just refreshes automatically via some really clever, cool new thing called Ajax scripts, which was really fun to learn. You go, oh, look, it fades in, it's cool. But it pops in, and they just look at that page. That's a page view. People won't pay for ads when everyone just has one page view. We need to figure out how to get people to engage, how to click, look at things, do more. You know how we do that? Well, let's create an algorithm that shows people what they want to see. Because that's how they phrase it. Hey, you don't want the live timeline. What you want is you want the feed of shit that we're showing to you because you don't want to miss posts that are important to you. I think that's almost literally how they phrased it too. That change was everything. There was a time on Facebook where you would miss things if you weren't looking at them when they happened. I know. It was a different time, but Facebook saw what Twitter did, changed their entire setup. Many of you may not be old enough to know this because this happened more than a decade ago. But once upon a time, Facebook too. YouTube as well. In fact, algorithms were a new thing. But when you have an algorithm, you have to design it. How do you design it? Well, the first thing is, the reason you're building it is you need page views. You need people to click and engage because engagement breeds page views, breeds ad views, breeds revenue. And revenue's the goal. Again, the answer is capital. Capital's the goal. So how do you get capital? Well, if something's liked by a lot of people who Brooks likes and Brooks follows, we should show him that thing first. And it should just pop up because people he likes like it. And so therefore it should show up. But is liking only likes? Like, is that what a like means? I don't think it is. In fact, in my experience, I often like things that I hate to remember them, to save them for later. It's more bookmarking than anything before they had bookmarks. I'd like a thing. But it didn't mean I liked it. Didn't mean I loved it. Didn't mean I wanted other people to see it. But it did now. So now, whatever people like the most is going to be showing up. And then someone realized if they did a video, I'm just thinking of like my favorite rage bait videos, that annoying blonde woman, what was her name? Trisha Paytas did a video about how, oh, God, it was awful. It was like, why books? Why read books? It was like the most clearly rage-inducing thing, but it was new. Rage was new. Rage farming was new. And the number of people who retweeted, liked, or commented was huge. Huge. Insane. And it went everywhere. And that thing yielded a lot of revenue for Twitter or Facebook or YouTube. That revenue meant that, oh shit, this is working. We need to strengthen this. So what you get is not a thoughtful thing. My videos, I appreciate that I have 70 some concurrent viewers. I appreciate all of you people. My videos will get 1,000, 2,000 views. I'm not saying a thing that people can clearly just disagree with. Not just go, fuck Brooks. If I made a video where I was like, Deleuze was the F word, it would do so well. It'd be against everything I believed. It'd be slurring. It'd be racist. It'd be evil. The number of people who'd see it would be huge. If I had a short saying that Deleuze and Nietzsche were undoing Marx because ultimately they wanted to return us to Platonism, I'd probably have videos that did better. Because the number of people who'd comment, the number of people who'd link to it to laugh at me, to shit on me, all of that stuff, it would do better. When that is how Twitter makes money, and then when I exist on YouTube, and this guy exists on YouTube and other people do, and how I make money is by having more people see my stuff, suddenly you've created an incentive structure to get reactions, not communication. Reaction, I wonder if there's a political leaning where the word reaction is more than just implied. Lilia, you mean rage baiting on social media? Because outrage media has long been stock and trade for publishers. Oh no, outrage media is the thing for sure. But I'm talking about the moment in time when we switched to an algorithm, and in that algorithm, you had rage become the currency. It's been around, but it also works differently inside of traditional media. Television of old, when people couldn't record things and pass VHS tapes around, if something was hated, it kind of went away. Like, it's a real thing. I remember trading VHS tapes of like shit that people had found or people had recorded, hack moments, the Max Headroom hack in Chicago, like shit like that. It's incredible. But these things are like unique and weird and gone. It's ephemeral because it didn't matter how many people afterwards wanted to see the thing. It was gone because you had to see it in the moment. A newspaper with a baiting headline. They didn't make you like write rage bait to make you rage at the newspaper. They put rage in there that made you want to read and rage about other things. That's a change. People are creating content so you rage at them. And it's part of an entire ecosystem now. TikTok basically grew off of this. Reaction content exists to have cringe, weird psychotics make videos that are clearly cringy and weird and psychotic and bullshit that other people can react to that are making fun of them, and this ecosystem grows. The number of views, the number of reactions, the number of everything, this is what it spawned. And all of this is reactionary. There's a reason we use that term. It's based in reaction, ressentiment, frustration, impotence, and rage. She like literally just like pretended that she didn't read books. Like, why do people need books? It was about books, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like, it was so clearly not true, but it went viral and went huge. And that was the thing, and it worked. So why would a system that is based on reactionary rage and rewarding that and monetizing that for the order of capital and in the interest of capital create reactionaries who are interested in the success of capital? I don't know, Ryan. Tell me.
Identities and our identities into our parties. The process of this occurring is one of a few forms of political polarization, and in a politically polarized country, the average person becomes significantly more anxious regarding political outcomes, and guess which party created a whole media ecosystem to take advantage of this anxiety? It's actually both parties, but the Democrats' media ecosystem is also primed against leftists, since leftist positions are too extreme to advocate.
You have to be the most simple-minded person to believe there is a democratic media empire.
That's media ecosystem.
The Democrats' media ecosystem. I appreciate that you think that the Democrats have a media ecosystem, dude. Is this at 2x? I think I put it at 1.25. It is slightly fast. It is not there. Now it's normal. It's like the opposite of the Douglas Lane video. It's like,
is also primed against leftists, since leftist positions are too extreme to advocate for, which is also not the best hill for the Democrats to die on, because, to cite a recent example, some of Kamala Harris's most successful campaign promises during her 2024 election were her pledge to prevent grocery price gouging, her plan to have a 25% income tax for billionaires, and the strengthening of collective bargaining laws for unions, all of which polled with over 60% favorability amongst the general electorate, and all of which are leftist policy proposals, which she quickly abandoned due to her party's priming against leftists.
I can't. And like, there's a lot, this is, yeah.
And their policies.
It's frustrating. People are frustrated.
All right, let's wrap this all up into one tight bow and send you on your way. There is no alt-left pipeline because a political radicalization pipeline requires a few things to begin.
And I'll mention, this guy has 7,000 subscribers, 7.8K subscribers, which is just shy of twice as many subscribers as me, okay? This video, in 3 weeks, has gotten 316,000 views. This is the problem.
Charismatic voices with massive investments from deep political pockets, subtly stoking the flames of fear en masse and in the public sphere. The Republican Party specifically engineered the right-wing media apparatus to do these things, and there are no equivalent voices on the left, no deep leftist pockets to invest in the potential voices that there may be. And
I kind of wanted to like Ryan, too.
Perhaps most importantly, no additional fear generated by the community-focused ideals of leftist politics.
That's at least on the direction. Take 2 seconds, dude. Put it together.
If fear is generated by the left, as we saw earlier, that fear will make someone more likely to adopt conservative policy preferences. And this is why your average dissatisfied American won't fall down a pipeline to the alt-left, and is also perhaps why the left should attempt to increase organizational efforts rather than attempting to go high by meeting the right in the marketplace of...
He's right. He's right. Give him this point.
Here's the reason he's wrong. Just so you know. If I were to say, you know what the left's problem's been? They don't try to organize. It's like a joke that I would say that out loud. Because that's like, do we need to organize? Sure. Did the right organize? No. What is the method of us defeating this? Is it, hey, let's go to our the socialist meeting nearby of some fucking group of fucks who get angry because we clap and demand we snap our fingers? Is that what we need to do? We've never had an issue with organizing. That's not the problem. The issue is making organizing useful.
Ideas, because the very fabric of the marketplace is stacked against them.
It's not stacked against them. It literally works counter to them in process. Very frustrating.
And that's it for this.
It's very frustrating. That's a very frustrating video to watch. The left doesn't have a problem with wanting to organize. The number of people who have hit me up or have hit people up, everyone here has had someone say, hey, you should come to a meeting. DSA is having a meeting. Like, have you been to a DSA meeting? Yours might be good. They exist. I have not been to a good one. And again, the issue is not that, because organizing only goes so far. It's organizing for something. Now, how do you create a goal on the left? How do you create messaging on the left that can be useful? He doesn't even know what leftism is. He couldn't even really state it. That puts us in a very difficult position, because it's basically saying, well, look, the system is it's stacked against you because of these things. No, the system is literally built by capital. Notice the one thing he didn't talk about is money the entire fucking time. It's fucking crazy to not talk about money as the center of this. It's, hey, look, rich people put a lot of money into right-wingers because those right-wingers fight for their taxes, and it's worth it. If you didn't know, it's called investment. Let's say I have $1 billion in wealth, and the Democrats are wanting to put out a wealth tax of 25%. Fuck, I don't want them to win. So I spend $30 million against that, and I don't get a wealth tax. That's profit. Let's say even better, I spend hundreds of millions of dollars because I'm Elon Musk, and I get Trump in there, who's going to give me a tax cut of astonishing proportions. Also let me put whatever fucking contracts I want in my own company's names. And I come out with all those companies making hundreds of billions of dollars more. That's called an investment. They're investing in more capital. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking the Koch brothers were like, and they weren't even about this. The conservatism is an accident to them. The Christian morality is incidental. There's a reason that they supported and paid for a lot of atheists who were on the right as well. They don't care about any of that. They want fewer regulations and they want less taxes. They want less everything because they don't want to pay money. They want to keep money. Money that's not even theirs. Because I don't believe any of that is theirs. That is the center of it. That's it. That's it. I have no idea why you would think it's anything but capital. And by the way, by doing this is the other fun part, and it's the reason I don't like Ryan anymore, is that line.
Dissatisfied America generated by the left, as we saw earlier, that fear will make someone more likely to adopt conservative policy preferences. And this
you might cause people to be conservatives. And the Cody Shoddy comment comes to mind. Some leftists were mean to me online, so I changed all of my political views that exist.
This is why your average dissatisfied American won't fall down a pipeline to the alt-left.
No, it's because it doesn't make them money. Let's say Kanye West. Let's take Ye. Ye is a fascinating figure for this. Is Kanye falling down? He has more money than God, and he is completely fucked up and insane. Did he fall down the black liberation line? No. Did he fall down any emancipatory line? No. He fell down the line that privileges capital and whiteness. That's it.
And is also perhaps why the left should attempt to increase organizational efforts.
And now, why I hate Ryan. This makes me nuts. It's the left's fault. The left should do something. Why aren't you doing something? You need to do something. Go do something. Because all this stuff is bad and you need to do something. He doesn't say He doesn't say I'm doing something. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's how. He says the left should organize more. So people watching this internalize impotence and ressentiment, which is what Ryan thrives on. Because as he said, he learned all he needed to from Contra and Philosophy Tube. Ressentiment and impotence. Very frustrating. Very frustrating.
And he, I don't know, but like he treat the left as a blob, right? As a kind of like a representation, which I don't know, like
he treats it all as a blob. He has no concept of what politics is really about. Like, that's the thing. Again, he went from the New Deal, had a reaction in Ronald Reagan, which is like, dude, 40 fucking years. 40 fucking years. It wasn't a reaction to Ronald Reagan. To say that is like, that had to be something like his dad told him.
Yeah, people really hated Social Security.
I mean, FDR is famously one of the most popular presidents who ever lived.
It's almost like he got elected 4 times.
Yeah. It's almost like he won a world war, got us out of depression. Like, the shit he did. And again,
it's almost like the entire country lined up on the railroad tracks that carried his body. Like,
I family has stories about that. It's like, but no, the reaction was against FDR. Or maybe the reaction was against what the Democrats turned into as the business leaders realized that the Republicans were failures and infiltrated the Democratic Party and made them pick Eisenhower and a few other shitheads. If you don't know the story of how his successor was chosen and what happened there and how genuinely there were almost riots, and how they co-opted, the business people co-opted the Democratic Party at that time. It's, again, if you don't know stuff, you can say things like, let's say you wanted to put this out. I find it awful. I think it might be important, but what do you guys think? Like, just even open up, but it's like, no, they need to organize more and you need to increase organizational efforts.
Attempting to go high by meeting the right in the marketplace of...
Don't meet them in the marketplace of ideas, because who wants a cultural win? Like, it's like, you suck, dude. Sorry. It was a milquetoast at best for a while, but this is really, really terrible. And what you did is terrible. And the number of views you have continually depresses me as a thing. So that's wonderful. No, this one I got to turn back to 1, but at least it was short. The saving grace. Look, if the first analysis inside of our world you don't start with is, how does the money work? Then you have no business doing a critique or analysis of society in any meaningful way. Because that's not even like...
Or let alone mention it.
Yeah, it didn't even mention it. If you don't at least bring it up at all, you need to take a second and realize that you're doing something that even the right wing doesn't do. You're giving a pass to capital entirely. That the hard extreme right, they do it by being angry that some 3 Jews in caves run the economy, but they still put the economy at the center. Like, Jesus Christ, how do you fuck that up that bad? It's just, it's empty. It's an empty position of a YouTube video. Like, one of the really amazing things that I'm starting to see more and more is AI, the way AI writes. AI doesn't write with a point because it doesn't understand what points are. It's a probabilistic machine. So when it writes, it tends to repeat things and sort of never go anywhere. Like, there's no thing there. And
yeah, it's like an endless PowerPoint bullet point.
It is. And what you get stuff out of AI that's similar to this, where it's like, this doesn't have a point. There's no incisive commentary or commentary of any sort. It's just him sedating, hey, by the way, here's what happened. Here's a couple things. And then, like, that sucks. And and it's like, good. Why is there no alt-lift pipeline? This video's almost a month old, and it doesn't have an answer.